So I'm looking forward for this session, and please a big, big warm applause to Martin Splitt, developer advocate from Google Switzerland, and Bartosz Goraljevic from Onely, an agency specializing on tech SEO. Welcome on the stage.
You go and I fix that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, you did great this morning, don't worry about it. So, not to scare you all away, I tried to break it down as much as I can, and I had half an hour, so this is going to be an interesting adventure. It's literally going to be wild. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. First things first, when we talk about website performance, there's many different definitions of that, but I think it is very useful to look at what happens once the network is out of the question, because networks are tricky, that is true, but we can't really control them. What we can control is what happens when the browser renders the page, but what the hell does that even mean? So we're going to look into that for a second. Then we're going to talk about how JavaScript adds to that, or where JavaScript comes into that process, because JavaScript is quite important these days and makes a lot of websites tick internally, right? And then I'd like to bring up the fact that not all JavaScript is created equal, and not all JavaScript works the same way. So we're going to address that for a second as well. And last but not least, and very importantly, we're going to talk about the jeopardy and the wild water ride that is mobile performance, especially on different phones, and that's what Bartosz is going to do. Because, oh my god, I'm not going to open that can of worms. Cool. So web performance does matter. If I want to look at cute doggos, then I care about how quickly I get the doggos from your website. Have you ever been on a train in Germany and used your phone and used das Neuland, aka the internet? You know, this is the best case scenario, that you load a page, you look at a white screen for 2 seconds, and then you look at this for a couple of seconds. There's a good chance that you're actually not going to see any doggos, which is not a great experience. So performance is where this starts and where this ends. We have to make sure that the content gets to the client and to the users as quickly as possible. And then once it is on the client, we have to figure out how to make that time from our data arrives on the phone to the data actually starts showing as a website as quick and as short as possible. To do so, we should look into what a browser does once the data has arrived. Well, let's actually look at what happens when the data starts arriving. So a website is definitely made from HTML and CSS. I mean, you can do one without CSS, that's perfectly valid, but it's not 1985 anymore, so we're probably going to use some styling as well. So we do these two files. And as these files download, so while they download, the browser already starts looking into them. Because HTML and CSS, being declarative formats, allow us to basically start understanding what we are being sent as it comes in, which is really nice. So the browser then has these parsers. It's basically a bunch of code that looks into the bits and bytes as they come in and goes okay, so this is an HTML element. It's the headline 1. Okay, so I have a headline 1 somewhere. And there's an image. Okay, cool, I have an image. I need to download that image, so I'll start the download. So basically, it starts organizing itself based on the data that comes in. The same for CSS. Okay, so the headline 1 is 2 times the size of the rest of the text. It is a sans text. It has a certain font that I need to download. This kind of stuff happens as it comes in. So basically, the moment bits and bytes arrive on our device, the browser starts doing something with them. How does it do this? Well, as I said, I just did a mental model, right? I made a mental model of, okay, so we have a headline here with some text in it, and it looks like this, and it does like that. Where does the browser do it? It doesn't have a magical brain somewhere. It doesn't have brain space to use. Instead, it creates what's called the DOM tree, the Document Object Model tree. Technically, actually, I have limited space here, okay, so bear with me. Technically, that's 2 trees. It's the CSS Object Model, and it's the Document Object Model. So we get a tree structure. It's we have the document, that's the top node, and then we have this headline 1, and then we have an image, and then we have a paragraph, and within the paragraph, we have a link, and then, this kind of stuff. So it builds a tree structure from it. Once it has this tree structure, or as the tree structure is being built, it can start figuring out where does stuff go, right? It's a little bit like building Legos. You have a piece of slate where you can put Legos on top of it, or you have a desk or table or whatever you've got. And basically then you go okay, so the headline spans the entire width of the space that I've got. So I put it here, and then I have this image. I can't put it next to it, because obviously the headline takes up that space. So I put it down here. Then we have a paragraph that should, because it's a paragraph, be below that, and and then it starts like assembling things. It can do this. So for instance, the image. Do we know how large the image is? No, because it's still downloading. Does that matter? Not that much. If the HTML tells us how large the image is, we can go like, okay, so I just reserve this much space. So your HTML and also CSS, which can also give the dimensions of elements, does help us here to build a skeleton, right? We can plan a little better. So we don't have to like redraw and reorganize everything over and over again. So this layout process is very important for performance. You want to do as few layouts as possible, right? So you want to create your DOM tree. If that DOM tree is really complicated, that's not going to be good either. But once you have the DOM tree, or as the DOM tree evolves, we want to make sure that we arrange things onto the page. And once we have arranged the things and we know what kind of content goes there and we have downloaded the image, we can actually draw the pixels that make the website show up in our browser. So those basically, the first two boxes are more or less like network. The data arrives. The second two, that's basically parsing. We are understanding what we are getting here. And then the layout phase and the rendering phase, which is what takes the layout and makes it into pixels, these two are really expensive. The parsing phase, not so much, because it starts as soon as bytes and bits start arriving at our device. But the last two phases, especially if we have to do them over and over again, are really expensive, make things very, very slow. Cool. So this is what the browser does. I slowed it down a little bit. The GIF is not playing. That's fantastic. OK, fair enough. Let's try that again. No. Let me reload this entire slide deck because, last minute things. Oh, Bartosz, I did a thing. I'm not sure what I did.
As long as you're not going to open any of my bookmarks,
this will be fine.
We're safe.
This will be fine. Whatever. Just imagine, so the GIF is not loading for some reason. I hope the other GIFs do. Basically, you would see blocks being arranged as the data arrives. It's like, OK, so this goes here, this goes there. The CSS says it has this size. The CSS says this is inline, this is not inline. And let's talk about JavaScript, because, JavaScript is a technical tool that can be quite complicated, just like paragliding. I tried paragliding. This is my first day. This is my second start. And I failed. Is paragliding evil? No. It's a lot of fun. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Is JavaScript evil? I know. We've heard that elsewhere. I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm saying is it's a tool that you have to understand and master. A lot of people write JavaScript like I did my start there. Is JavaScript evil? I don't think so, right? So the problem is that JavaScript has, for many developers, become a panacea of, this is my Swiss Army knife, I do everything with it. And then we end up with timelines like this. The yellow bits and pieces, they are very hard to see because there's not that many. The yellow bits and pieces are JavaScript execution. So we have 350 kilobytes JavaScript, which uncompressed to a megabyte of JavaScript on the device. And that makes the website take 15 seconds to become interactive for the user. Is that good? No. Oh, God, no, that's not very good. This is data from the HTTP archive, so it's not like any local market or something. It's global data. But still, I think that's a problem. I think we have to look into this. But we also have to understand, where does JavaScript come into this? So JavaScript downloads. The problem with JavaScript is it's not the same as an image. As the image comes in, we can start understanding what the image data is and basically start like drawing it out. The same with HTML. As soon as we got this H1 element in the text, we can put it on the screen because we know what it is going to be looking like. We got the CSS coming in, we can change the way that it looks. If it's just the color, then we just like repaint it. If it has changed its size, then we have to, resize the things that we have on our website as well. But basically, we can start working as soon as we get something. With JavaScript, we have to make sure that we have everything because we can't start with it. So it takes a lot longer to start processing and understanding the JavaScript file than it does take for HTML, CSS, or images, right? We can't just like get ahead and like start, OK, yeah, sure. No, we have to wait to make sure that everything makes sense, that we have the entire JavaScript file. That's why it's important to make sure that you program defensively. You're not going to be knowing what's happening in the browser specifically, and this takes quite a while to download if it's large. So the size of the JavaScript files matter. Then it gets parsed, cool. But as we parse it, as we understand this is JavaScript and this means something, we basically just get a tree. It's called an abstract syntax tree. I left it out for brevity here. And once we have this tree, we can actually only then start executing and doing changes. Well, what kind of changes can it do? I mean, now we have probably pixels on screen at this point because everything else has started as soon as bytes arrived. Where can it make a difference? Well, pretty much everywhere. We can create new JavaScript new HTML content, which needs to be parsed and then put into the DOM tree. We can change the DOM tree directly. We can remove things from it. We can add things to it. That doesn't require parsing. That's fine. But still, if we remove something or add something, that might cause the layout to like, oh, OK. We can change the CSS, which needs to be parsed, understood, and then worked into the CSS object model, into the tree again. And then that might change how things look on our website. And then, if we are really unfortunate, our JavaScript is basically doing the entire thing again. So it starts with like some CSS parsing, very small piece of code, runs for a very short second, does some change in the CSS, gets parsed, gets added to the CSS object model DOM tree, gets added or changes the layout, and then changes the pixels on screen. So that's quite a lot of work. And then we see domino effects. So here, this, from a JavaScript perspective, I'm like, I'm good. This is not my fault. There's not that much yellow here, right? So the only yellow that I caused as a JavaScript developer is this tiny bit here. Sorry, guys, this is not my problem. Yes, it is. Because this little bit of JavaScript there changed one piece of CSS. And that little change causes all this work. Green means pixels being drawn. It's the slowest thing second slowest thing after layouting. And you see there's some purple in there. The purple is layouting. Good job. Not good job. On mobile phones, this is on a MacBook. On a mobile phone, this would be much, much worse. This would be like a slideshow. And let me show you, lo and behold, of the graphical beauty that is this interaction. Oh, the GIF is not playing. There is a drawer coming in. It's a drawer menu. You know, the little hamburger icon, you click it somewhere, and then a thing pops over. It's a menu. A menu slides in. A menu. We're not talking some fancy 3D animations. We're not talking some fancy VR stuff. I've worked with VR on the web. It's a great thing. But this is not it. It's a freaking drawer that comes in from the side. Why is it doing all this work? This GIF is not playing either. That's fantastic. The reason is we have a lot of green on this timeline, which means it keeps repainting it over and over and over again. So technically, this is actually bad CSS, because the CSS property that we changed does cause repaints. So you want to make sure that your CSS performance is good as well. Nonetheless, this change is caused by JavaScript. So maybe the JavaScript developer was like, CSS is easy. A lot of JavaScript developers say like, CSS is easy. That's like, whatever. But then they do things like this. They don't ask the designer. They don't talk to the CSS folks. They don't know CSS well enough. They're just going to be like, I'm just going to move the menu over, and then we'll be good, right? And they cause these performance problems. So make sure to understand it holistically. You have to understand HTML. You have to understand CSS and JavaScript. You don't have to understand all of that. You have to make sure that your developers understand that. Good developers will help you with it. Bad developers will just like, you know, the timeline shows it's only this tiny little part of JavaScript. This is not my fault. That's a problem. You want to be able to investigate with them. If a developer blocks that, you need to have a very serious conversation with someone who can, you know, make a change in that direction. And not all JavaScript is the same. So here we have a JavaScript app to show me doggos. And it took quite a while for the first doggo to show up. This is not fun. I mean, the first two, that's the network. What are you going to do? But then we see a lot of loading until we actually finally get the image. That's not good. But this is using a framework. I'm not going to blame any framework because any framework has the same characteristics. Same framework, slightly different code. Hey, I get doggos quicker. And this is only one frame, but this is actually 3 seconds. So what? This is a very slow mobile connection, but what? I get a better time to first doggo, so, you know. It doesn't get any better than that, right? It's the same JavaScript framework. But Martin, if that's the same JavaScript framework, then would you be so kind and explain to me why the heck there's a difference and the better time to first doggo here? If it's the same JavaScript framework, what the hell, Martin? Well, what's the difference? The difference is the first one uses the default client-side rendering, which means you send all the JavaScript, and then the JavaScript does the entire rest of the profile. So it basically has to do all the work. And instead of that, the second one uses hybrid rendering. Hybrid rendering does run the JavaScript. It's also sometimes called universal or isomorphic JavaScript. It's the same thing. It's hybrid rendering runs the JavaScript on the server side to create the initial HTML and CSS trees, and then basically reserializes that into HTML and CSS. The browser starts processing it as it arrives, and then the JavaScript only does things on interactions. So basically, the JavaScript gets transmitted in the background as well. And whenever it's ready, you get nice transitions and effects and whatnot. So you get a classical standard website until the JavaScript fully populates and pops in. It's called hydration sometimes. The JavaScript hydrates and then makes it a full-blown single-page app, and really nice stuff happens. That's great. But it's optional. You don't have to have it happen. So basically, this is your browser on client-side rendering. It gets everything in one go from the JavaScript, and then it goes like, whoa. We are breaking things that we are getting for free with client-side rendering. The browser gives us progressive parsing of HTML and CSS for free, and we just throw that away when we are client-side rendering. That's not great. If I would come to you and say hey, let me do the dishes for you for a week, would you say screw you, no. I want JavaScript to do my dishes. That's a really weird analogy. Anyway, so you're not going to throw away something that is given to you for free, right? So you have a few options available if you use JavaScript. You can go client-side rendering, which is basically the default in most frameworks. That does need JavaScript for rendering the essential content, because the content is basically not there. It's completely constructed by the JavaScript. So you're losing the first couple of stages of the pipeline that the browser has to render a page. But it doesn't require you to make any code changes, because it's the default. Yay. Then you can do fully server-side rendering. You can say oh, no, I don't want that. I just use JavaScript to do analytics and stuff, and everything else is just static HTML. That needs a lot of code changes and actually takes away some of the nice usability features as well, like transitioning and all these kind of loading as you go and do skeleton loading and all these kind of things. So that's not great either. I mean, it's robust if done right, but you're not necessarily getting the best of both worlds. And then there's dynamic rendering, which is a workaround that gives you no usability or user experience benefits whatsoever. It only gives you benefits when dealing with crawlers. So that's a workaround. Then you have hybrid rendering, on the other hand, where the JavaScript is run on the server, which you control, which means that you can rely on it more or less. If you have a reliable server, that is, but that's a problem that can be fixed. So if you have a reliable server, it generates the HTML, it generates the CSS, and it gives you static content, and then loads as the JavaScript becomes available, it enhances your application, and it does give you all the benefits that JavaScript applications give you. So I think hybrid rendering is kind of the best of both worlds. Might not be easy, but especially if you start a new project, I would highly recommend looking into hybrid rendering. If you are using React.js at work, or your clients use that, then you should definitely have a look at Next.js for landing pages and most of your critical pages. This might not work for a full-blown e-commerce solution, I don't know, but at least some pages might be benefiting from Next.js, which gives you hybrid rendering. If you're using Angular, which is also very popular these days, you can use Angular and Universal. Universal comes basically built into Angular. You just have to activate it, make some changes to your server configuration probably. So it does require code changes, but you have documentation and a lot of help from the community there as well. If you're using Vue.js, which is also quite popular and becomes more popular as we speak, basically, there's Nuxt.js, which is, as you can probably tell, heavily inspired by Next.js. It gives you the same thing just for Vue.js. So all of these give you a server-side part where the JavaScript generates the initial content that you can also cache, which might actually bring down your server costs. And then the JavaScript on the client side kicks in and hydrates and improves the application for the users as well. So you get the best of both worlds with these. And now I'd like to step back for a second and say, like, cool, now we just talked about the web being uniform. But that's not what it is. And I think Bartosz is the right person to continue from here out on, because he wants to open the can of worms that is mobile performance. So I'd invite you to give a round of applause to Bartosz and learn more about mobile performance. Have fun, man.
Before I begin, I wanted to find something. And first of all, while I'm looking for that magic bag, he did this whole deck within 15 or 20 minutes. This guy is a machine. And, I probably should start my own deck. That's a good thing to do, which is because Googlers use Google Slides.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Okay. PowerPoint. Back to PowerPoint. So I was supposed to go after Bastian today, but this was still a very nice change. No offense to Bastian, of course. And what I want to talk about is how we know some of the best practices. I'm guessing that Bastian would squeeze like many more slides tightly with more things. But we know the best practices to optimize our websites. But we need to know what are the limitations and what's the ecosystem we are in with that. So let me. I probably should need a different clicker.
You need the clicker? There you go.
Yeah, I could use a clicker. So let me start with why mobile web performance is important for me or for you in general. I was researching German market for the last few weeks, and I was totally surprised with how and I'm not even going to talk about mobile. With just 20% of desktop, like, guys, this is surprising. So we can assume that desktop is dead in Germany. Looking at data from Chrome Cloud, from CRUX, Chrome User Experience Report, because Google was so nice to share it with the world. So real user metrics show that desktop is 20 to 25, sometimes 30% of traffic in Germany, which is very, very surprising for me. And we ran this test, and I want to show you this video to kind of show what I'm going to be talking about, because this video explains more than anything I'm going to say. So on the, let me pull a different clicker. So this is the first Samsung Galaxy ever released. And while we were opening CNN on both those phones, while this was struggling with JavaScript, I was trying to find out on an iPhone X what kind of phone that is exactly, because we just found it in our office. And this video is 3 minutes, and spoiler alert, the website doesn't fully load throughout this time. So as you can see, CNN pushing a lot of JavaScript to the client is really difficult to use when you have an old mobile phone. And throughout this time, you can see I'm Googling Samsung Galaxy first model and so on. I won't go through the whole thing, but yeah, you need to see the moment when it kind of went to sleep because it was too long. So I found the model, I did everything, and the website still didn't load. Yeah, it went to sleep just now, and we couldn't wake it up. It actually froze throughout CNN. So that's the problem I want to address today in this presentation. So there was this article. How many of you know this article from Adi Osmani from Google? Okay, 5 people, so probably that's a very bad session for you to be in. I'm sorry. So Adi Osmani, I'm going to explain that, no worries. Adi Osmani wrote an article that was amazing about how JavaScript affects loading on a different mobile phone. So how the website would load differently on iPhone 8 and on a very old Motorola, for example. And this is why I'm going to do the big release of what's in the bag in a second. So he found out that Motorola G4 is an average phone used in 2018, and you should optimize your website to work properly on that phone, on that CPU, because it's kind of slower than, for example, iPhone X. And after that, that study, that article being published, loads and loads of developers, and I actually was a part of some workshop with developers, started downgrading a lot of features to be in line with Motorola G4. So they started kind of decrease the amount of JavaScript, the amount of, so they were trying to make their website lighter on the CPUs of mobile users. So if you ever had this problem with like WordPress optimizing optimizing images for WordPress, I always find that some of the plugins or tools like optimize the image that is like 5 kilobytes, but you can't really see what's on the image anymore. So we really need to find a balance between pushing a lot of data, a lot of code, and being fast. And this is actually one of the slides from Adis Osmani article. This was extremely viral in the development and performance community for a very good reason. And that's something that Martin talked about already. But is the data right? So that's something I was struggling with. And just so you know, this is a new deck. I redid this whole deck throughout the last 2 weeks, because I found that a lot of the data that I was using in my decks throughout years was actually wrong, and that's because I'm guessing Adi oversaw the source of the data he used. So Adi mentioned that Motorola G4 is an average phone in 2018, and he quoted a source. If you look at the link, it goes to the article from 2017, so that's one issue already, but this article shows that Motorola G4 was the median phone last year, so we're going back to 2016, and Motorola G5 Plus is the median phone in 2017. So the post is from 2017. Motorola G4 was a median phone in 2016. It's 2019, so this is not 3 but 4 years of a gap in technology of what we should optimize for. Why is this important for you guys? First of all, there is a massive gap between those two phones. So Motorola G5 Plus is twice as powerful as Motorola G4. If we can talk any of those phones, it's like very powerful. And what about 2018? And we are currently almost halfway through 2019, so we should really look into how we build our websites, how we create our stacks, and how we design everything we do. So Motorola G5 Plus, and again, that's 2017 median phone, is as performing as iPhone 6s. So it's not as bad if you look at that. I'm guessing that in the audience we probably have quite a few people with iPhone 6s. That's at least the statistics from Google Analytics I saw. And what we did, Motorola G5 is actually a little bit better in some fields than iPhone 6s. And now here comes the biggest issue, that most modern websites and most development teams build their website and benchmark about the phone, like against the phone that was actually a median 4 years ago. So that's something we want to address. And even if you look at tools like web page test and a lot of modern tools testing performance, they would use that as a benchmark. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. So what we did is we disregarded all of the artificial and lab tests, and we went with, as we usually do, with a real-life approach. And this is going to be funny for you, because we actually went and bought a lot of old mobile phones, which turned out to be an amazing adventure for our team. So we, on a short notice, bought quite a lot of very old phones, including the Samsung Galaxy S from 2010 that we actually had in the office for some reason. But the problem is, if you remember those good old times, we don't have Amazon in Poland, so we had to fall back to look for those weird phones in a different place. And finding a Motorola G4 isn't easy in Europe. No one is using that phone. And that's actually a story I wanted to tell you because it's hilarious. So we found a used Motorola G4, just one, on OLX, and I asked my friend from work, Emil, to give this guy a call and try to push a price a little bit more and just pick up the phone because we needed that like ASAP. And Emil was like a tough negotiator, something I didn't know about him. He picked up the phone and said, like, no one is going to buy this phone, this lame phone. And he said, I'm paying 30 euros. Like the asking price was 100. And now as actually something that was really interesting, the guy was like, yeah, I guess you're right. And he sold us the phone for 35 euros. So you can see the value, like real life value of Motorola G4. And just to show you what's in a bag, we bought over the last few weeks. I'm traveling to States tomorrow. That's going to be interesting with customs. We bought all of the phones used in Germany and States. That's Motorola G4 for 35 euros. It's for sale if you guys like it. You're gonna see on the last slide is gonna have the offering. Yeah, I'm not joking. So we actually bought all of the phones and kind of have fun with.
We're rolling. 1 second. 3, 2, 1, go.
So I can operate phone with a lot of fingers now.
iPhone X.
So that's iPhone X. Went kind of quick.
iPhone 5, second.
Yeah.
Motorola G4, third. And a very, very old Samsung.
Last but not least.
Actually, last and least.
So just recording this video was like literally 50 takes because we couldn't press the buttons at the same time. And then you need to clear cache, you need to clear history and remove all the service workers. So that was 3 hours to record this video, so I hope you liked it. We're not doing that professionally, like recording videos, fortunately. But yeah, so if we look at the non-lab results, they were a little bit different than other tests, and more or less, because every time we did it, we had a little bit different result. You can see that, yeah, for real, Motorola G4 is a slow phone. Samsung Galaxy S, that you won't buy that anywhere. It's just something just in our museum. It's 18 seconds. So there are massive differences between iPhone X and some of the old phones. But the problem is, what's the right device to optimize for? Should you even worry about those devices here in Germany? And that's something I've been trying to investigate over the last few weeks. And we've created the experiment to address that. That was actually extremely interesting. I hope it's going to be as interesting for you as well. So we looked into Crux data, Google Analytics from some of the big stores here in Germany with proper setup. So Google Analytics won't show you which iPhone that is, so I'm going to touch on that in a minute. And we looked into mid-market German websites with few millions of visits per month, so we have like a nice sample. So we were aiming for 5 million or more, and we basically looked through our client analytics to get this data. And we looked at the pretty fresh data, so we look at 6 to 9 months to have a look into what's actually being used in Germany. So when you actually optimize your websites, you know what to optimize for. And it was a massive surprise. That's actually our graphic designer thinks this guy looks like me, so yeah. So internet connections, and looking at the global statistics, we need to address the global connections. How many of you think that you have fast internet here in Germany? Sorry? Why should they move forward? You didn't. So globally, you guys are so wrong. Globally, 75% of connections occur over 2G or 3G. That's the statistic that's being thrown around internet all of the time, but not in Germany. If we look at Crux, the data from Google Chrome, and we look through a lot of different sources, 98% of the traffic here goes over 4G, and you can look at a lot of data we pulled to prove that, and 98% of the traffic in Germany goes through 4G, and the average speed is 16 to 30 megabits. I knew that this is going to be a very controversial slide, like I didn't see this coming, but it's very difficult to argue with a lot of data, and we went through literally like 50 websites to check if this is true, and we went between 96 and 98%. Now everyone's like, this guy is wrong. I'm not listening anymore. But let's drop the connection. Like, yeah, I know your connection is very slow. Let's drop the connection for a second. Let's focus on the mobile devices again. So looking at real data from Google Analytics of like big websites with a lot of traffic, we found that the weakest device in 65% sample, so looking at 65% of the most popular phones, the weakest device we found was Samsung A5. I actually have it somewhere with me, obviously. And that's the video of Samsung A5.
And 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, timer was gonna.
So just so you know, iPhone X has a CPU that's more powerful than 2016 MacBook Pro 13-inch. So iPhone X has a massive CPU. That's why we're actually benchmarking against that, because it's difficult to find something more performing better than that. And Samsung Galaxy A5 wasn't that far off. It was like 1 second, depending on the website, it was around 1 second like off from iPhone X. So the weakest device in 65% sample would perform almost identically as iPhone X. And the price point for Samsung A5 2016, the one we found in analytics is 2017, but we couldn't get that one. So we actually used the older one just so we're good, is 240 euros. But let's go even lower. Let's go with a sample of 80% of devices here in Germany from few very big websites. And it was Samsung J3 2017. Actually, so it's actually a pretty low-end, cheap phone that we, again, bought for testing. And it turns out that this one actually is, okay, it's 150 euros right now. I'm guessing it's difficult to find a new one anymore because they don't make them anymore. But it's the exact equivalent of Motorola G4 performance-wise. So when we tested Motorola G4 and Samsung one by one, they were almost identical. So we can see right now that the Motorola G4 is in the median, especially here in Germany. It's a very, very low end. And just so you know, like something about our methodology, is 85% sample. Doesn't mean that the 15% of the other devices are weaker. They're just like 1,000 random devices that we couldn't or had no idea how to test. So if you go with Samsung J3 or Motorola G4, that's the slowest device used to access your website, but I wouldn't really use that as a benchmark to build your website towards that device. Moving forward, so if we look at the iPhones and how they spread, which is also quite interesting. So if you install a custom filter in Analytics, you can see exact iPhone devices. So 60% of the iPhones, okay, iPhones are like 40% of the traffic in Germany, 60% of them being iPhone 7 or higher, 96% being iPhone 6 or higher. So again, iPhone 6 is a pretty powerful device, so I wouldn't worry about optimizing for anything less. So how do you know which iPhones are the most popular? Is you need to create like a custom dimension in Analytics to actually have like the information of what iPhones and what iPads your users are using to access your website. So we talked about Germany, and I wanted to compare that with the USA, which is actually quite interesting. And I won't go through all the data, but 70% of all the mobile devices in States are made by Apple, which is probably not that surprising for you as the internet thing. But the median iPhone, and that's actually quite interesting, is somewhere between iPhone 8 and iPhone X. So we've created this wonderful visualization of iPhone 9. So if you optimize for an iPhone in States, in general, your median device, more or less, that's not exact science, but more or less is going to be iPhone 9. Obviously, you can't buy it, so go with iPhone 8, but that would be a nice phone. But the ultimate proof, and that's something that Martin quoted, and he was partially right, is that the time to interactive was 15 seconds in 2018, but currently it dropped to 9. So that's something that it has to be addressed, that you can see that the mobile devices became much more performant or powerful, and over the last year, it dropped by 6 seconds, which is massive. So no longer we can say, okay, the average time to interactive is very slow. And we've created kind of like a wonderland. So all is perfect. And who in the audience thinks it makes our job with web performance easier? Okay. I was expecting like completely opposite reaction. In the very beginning, when we actually went with this research, I was thinking, I'm out of the job. No one is going to optimize for JavaScript. All of the CPUs are so wow. I'm not building tension, just and with web performance, there is always rule number one. I think that Martin would agree here. It never gets easier. It gets easier with more JavaScript. So we can go with a little bit more JavaScript, I guess, but we need to be very mindful of how we do that. And we also have this guy who's a party pooper here to all the JavaScript madness. So we need to be very mindful of Googlebot and how Google is, in a way, still limited to crawl and index JavaScript. And not only Google, but all of the search engines have bottlenecks of processing JavaScript. Seriously, guys, Alta Vista joke. I was like, no one is going to laugh at that. And EA, like looking at the bottleneck, a lot of big brands still have no idea how to handle JavaScript, how to properly go through that to make it accessible to bots, indexable, and rank well. So if you look at EA Games, a brand I personally like for the reasons I don't wanna talk about, but you can guess, they are completely invisible to Googlebot, and that has a very, very specific cost for them. And my favorite example, so AliExpress, a very, very JavaScript-heavy website, they still don't deal with that very well. So if you look at that, they're still invisible to Google. Googlebot, just like Wish.com and Alibaba, they seem to have like similar issues. And that has a massive cost for them as well. So we can go, especially here in Germany or maybe in States, now we have to talk about the internet, but the internet is kind of slower in States. We can go with a little bit more JavaScript, but we need to be very mindful that search engines won't really have the processing or computing power to go through that throughout the next few, John would have to confirm, but I'm guessing few weeks until they fully crawl and index JavaScript on scale. That was a very bad joke. Because Googlebot is still using Chrome 41, and if we're using iPhone analogies all the time, it's just as old as iPhone 6. So they're both 4.5-year-old. So they are kinda, they have their limitations, is what I'm trying to say here. And just to understand the whole mobile performance and JavaScript performance, how all those things add together, this is an ecosystem, and we can't really look at one of those things without looking at the others. So when we're looking at web performance or JavaScript indexing and mobile first, they're all limited by computing power. So in this case, mobile phones and their CPUs, and connection speed that shouldn't discuss anymore here. But this is the main limitation when you build any website, when you create any new infrastructure. You need to be mindful of all those things, and you can't really like focus on just web performance without looking at JavaScript indexing and all the limiting powers between. But at the same time, if you manage to tame the beast, if you manage to work with them properly, you can get a lot of love from both your users, but most important from search engines, which we saw a lot of case studies happening massively. So that's a massive potential right now to get more traffic. But there is a catch of not catching up to technology. And this is my favorite slide out of all of those. And you need to watch it closely. So Motorola G4 on the left, so like an old cheap phone, beat-up phone for 35 euros, opening Amazon.de, and MediaMarkt on the right, on brand new, on fairly new Samsung Note 8, and go. So you can have the best device ever, the same internet connection, but your website is not going to load quickly. So if you see that Amazon did a very good job with web performance, even on a very old phone, Amazon loaded almost instantly for me. That was actually in my hotel room yesterday. But MediaMarkt kind of dropped the ball completely. So they had the same connection, brand new phone, but they dropped the ball completely with loading. So we are able to ship a little bit more JavaScript right now, but this really makes things more complex. Something I actually didn't think throughout the last year. So we are at the point when, especially in Germany, market like this one, you can ship more JavaScript, but it makes things more complex. And you need to know that mobile performance is a ranking factor since last year. So, and you need to benchmark against your competitors. So as you see with MediaMarkt, they have to benchmark against Amazon.de, Otto.de, or anyone within their niche. Like obviously, Amazon would be probably the biggest competitor of MediaMarkt, and they need to kind of catch up to that performance. And you need to know your market. So Germans, and your market is very particular. I believe that Germany is one of the most competitive markets from the SEO and web performance point of view, and you have like the best SEO teams and really well optimized websites. And I saw how your development team works. There are not many teams like that worldwide. So you are in a very kind of difficult situation from that point of view. Yeah, I will skip this part. You are economically wealthy, which actually translates to better mobile devices throughout your user base. And if we look at, for example, average salary versus the cost, something we actually do with our clients recently, cost of iPhone 6, it's just a tiny fraction. So we can assume that most people here can afford iPhone 6 or better. And looking at the very actionable data for you after this session, so you need to get interactive within 5 seconds, and you probably know that. But this is the first session that actually can tell you on which device. So you need to get interactive within 5 seconds on Samsung A5 from 2017, actually skip that, because they're different. So Samsung A5 from 2017 or iPhone 7. And if you do that, you should be good. Catch up to your competitors, so compare, like buy all of those phones, compare one by one. And use JavaScript. It's good. Sorry, buddy. It's amazing. It's not evil. It's good, but use it wisely. It's actually very, very complex, but it's a good thing to do. And design your website based on real data. And that's something I want to finish with, because if you look at Germany, and if some of you are on like international market, we looked into our client data, and that's actually extremely interesting from Indonesia. One of the top phones were Oppo. I have no idea what brand that is, but they are like dominating. Xiaomi, I have no idea how to read that. Xiaomi and Oppo are two key brands dominating Indonesian mobile market. There are a few iPhones, but they're not the top devices. So if you're in that market, those devices are not going to process JavaScript almost at all. The level of performance of those phones is very similar to the one we saw in the first videos that loaded CNN within 3 minutes and went to sleep. So with Indonesia, for example, as your market, I wouldn't really push too much JavaScript. Thank you so much. I have one announcement regarding the deck URL. Throughout this change, I need to upload my deck again because we edited that through the change with Bastian. So it's going to be live within a minute. Tom, 250 euros. I told you I have a slide for you. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Sit down.
Well, thank you so much. I will sit down with you on the couch.
Oh, you promised us the big beatbox.
No, we can't do beatbox because the audio guy said not with the headset. It might
crank up
the sound.
Next time.
But I have some questions for you. We only have a few minutes, so if possible, we make it like fast as websites should go with the answers to those questions. I just had a quick word with Martin, so we had a pre-selection of the questions. So we start with Satoshi Kimura, and the questions might be highlighted up there, if possible, but I will read them. When will Googlebot's rendering engine update? When we use JavaScript, we have often a problem with or for SEO.
41.
When will Google's rendering engine update? When we use JavaScript,
So,
we have all
that's the question to
okay.
Martin,
I
I guess.
love how pissed off you just looked at me like, yeah, Martin.
No,
when is it
I
gonna
was
be
like,
updated?
I felt sorry for you, like answering that.
No, that's fine. That's a really great question. We're working
Before
on
he
it.
replies, I'm guessing he has no idea yet.
Actually, I do, but I'm not going to tell you. No, it's work in progress. It's done when it's done.
No, but
Well, that was fast.
just to defend Google here, it's extremely complex, and we saw that we work with pre-rendering engine of like a few thousand servers, and I feel sorry for them.
Quick show of hands. Who here has heard of Puppeteer or Rendertron or Google Headless Chrome? That's the work of our rendering team. So it's not that they just sit on their hands and do nothing. This work is the benefits are coming through now. It's just not done yet, so we're working on it.
Is your deck gonna be available for the audience? I forgot that to moderate. It's important for you, I think.
So,
is it?
as this deck is not about search specifically, yes, this is going to be available. I'll tweet the slides.
Next question, and I think we can do probably 2 more questions, but then we have to be fair because we only have a 5-minute break, and then Sebastian will be on stage. How would you handle cookie bar loading via JavaScript?
As synchronously and as late as possible.
Perfect. What's the fastest, that one you chose, because it's apples and oranges, sorry to get that in
that's
advance.
okay.
What's the fastest JavaScript framework?
That's the wrong question. As I showed you, the same framework can yield very different results. Definitely benchmark in your specific use case and in your code and with real-world data.
Then we go user-generated, if you go that fast. This got the most votes. It's new. For which type of phone and connection, open the brackets, 3G or LTE, close the brackets, does Google their testing via PageSpeed Insights?
I don't know.
Okay.
You don't need to read that.
You see
We
it.
now see
Perfect.
it, yeah.
Okay, now
So-
we got it on the previous screen as well. Sorry.
I don't know. Next question. This interview is over.
Okay.
No, just kidding.
One more. Martin.
Gee.
You see it here.
Yeah.
So what is the preferred
Hybrid
solution?
rendering, I said that. Listen carefully.
Hybrid rendering. Okay. So last question. One question for you. You will have a session at 5 p.m. this afternoon where talking between devs and SEOs
Yes.
might be very important.
Yes.
Is it possible to drop your questions at your...
Sure.
So
Twitter
5
me.
p.m. This day, and if you have any questions to Bart, they are jumping around, just pack them. In Germany, you would say pack die. Yeah. What page loads, last question, metric does really matter to track optimization measures?
Do you want to answer that?
Oh my God. So I would say time to first meaningful paint for me and time to interactive.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, if it goes that fast. Last question. Notice this one we had. What about that one?
So with the analytics, look for Tomek Rudzki, the bald guy here in second row. He did it for us. Tomek, stand up. Stand up. So he can do that for everyone here, like today.
Whoa! I'm very sorry.
But I think it's a really basic category on the left where you go from users, technology, phones, and then you make a segmentation for
Or
devices.
ask Toby.
But I want to answer Dan's question.
All right.
So Dan Petrovic.
Last question officially.
I don't know Dan, but he seems like a very smart guy. So J3 was actually clean. I got it from my neighbor who didn't use it. But regardless of that question, we actually found that even when you use incognito, sometimes service workers and some other things would still be in cache and would affect page load to be faster than it should, which sounds bad now. So we need to clear the cache history, everything before every single reload. Hence, that took us so much time. And yeah, but we can chat later on. I have the J3 here, so we can test.
Perfect. Well, then I would say we close the polls.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much, Martin and Bartosz.